and welcome to section 2 of the course. In this section, we'll be talking about the Texas Constitution and the different constraints that it puts on us as citizens and also on the institutions of government. So this video will be a little bit different. I want to, instead of focusing on one concept, go over the major things I want you to learn in this particular section. So the first is that the U.S. has a federal system which assigns power to both the nation and to the state governments. What this means is that our state governments are often constrained by what our U.S. Constitution says that they can or cannot do. Even though we may want to make certain changes within each state that reflect what the citizens of each state want, we have to conform to the U.S. Constitution and ensure that the laws of the nation and the laws of the state align with one another. The second takeaway from this particular section is that constitutions have four purposes: legitimacy, organizing government, providing power, and limiting government power. So first of all, constitutions give governments legitimacy. These documents lay out exactly how the government is going to function and exactly how it should function and what citizens are allowed to do. This allows everyone to know the rules of the game and to operate within the constraints that we've all agreed upon within the Constitution. The second purpose of a constitution is organizing government. So the Texas Constitution lays out the three branches of government. The executive branch gets some power, the legislative branch gets some power, and the judicial branch gets some power. Everyone is aware of which powers belong to which branch, and even further than that, it goes into detail on what local governments can do. This ensures that each branch and level of government does not overstep its boundaries. The third thing constitutions do is provide power, which is related to the second. If the legislature wants to know if it's able to do something or not, it can simply look to the Constitution and determine if it has that power or if it doesn't. The fourth function of the Constitution is to limit government power, and this normally comes in the form of civil rights and civil liberties. So there are some things that we are allowed to do as Americans and as Texans that the Constitution gives us power to do. For example, you have the right to vote. You have the right to a trial by jury. You have the right to peaceably assemble. These are constraints that limit the government's power and allow you to function within the political system. The third big takeaway of this section is that the Texas Constitution reflects the traditionalistic and individualistic political culture of the state. So in the last module, we talked about political culture, and you got to explore the concept a little bit in discussing with your colleagues. And it's important to recognize that the Constitution takes those values into account and sort of codifies them in a legal way. So in Texas, the emphasis is on the individual and it's on kind of the traditional manner of the state. And if you look at the Constitution, although it is very lengthy, you can see how that is introduced and how that is reflected in the writing of that particular document. Finally, I'd like to point out that the electorate still lacks sufficient understanding of the shortcomings of the present Constitution to be receptive to revisions that involve increases to government power. So one effect of having such a lengthy Constitution that has over 400 amendments is the fact that oftentimes the common citizen does not understand everything that's encapsulated in that document. With that being said, we could revise our Constitution here in this state to reflect giving the government more power, to allow them to provide more services to different classes of people and things like that. But if the citizens aren't supportive of that, then it's unlikely to happen, especially since amendments are added to the Constitution by citizen vote. So as you're going through this module, I want you to kind of think about a few questions and think about what you think the right answers are. So, of the four purposes of the Constitution, which one do you think is the most important or the most critical? And if you think one particular option, such as legitimacy or limiting government power, is more important, then how do we emphasize that to the common citizen and make them understand that? Another thing I'd like you to think about are perhaps the similarities and differences between the US Constitution and the Texas Constitution. There are some aspects that are almost identical, and there are many aspects that are very, very different. So why do those differences exist? Is it because one has to cover the whole country and one has to cover just one state? Is it because of the different political cultures nationally versus here in Texas? Or is there some other reason? And of course, many other questions will come up as you're going through the material, and I encourage you to reach out to either me or your classmates to discuss those things. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week with another lecture.